I have now set up my application.cfc file with 4 methods, 2 for application, start and end, 2 for request, start and end, although my request methods are commented out because they're pulling in a header and footer, and I don't want that to interfere with the error handling portion that I want to show you right now. I also have error exception and error request pages created. On those pages, I have a dump listed of the error variables. I also have the site-wide error set up within the ColdFusion Administrator. So now that all of those pieces are in place, what I can do is within my application.cfc file, and I can really put it anywhere. I could put it after the application methods. Personally, I tend to put it above those methods. And I think it's just because if I need to change them, it's right up at the top moving forward. But what I'm going to do is tell ColdFusion that if a particular type of error occurs, show one of these 2 files. This is actually an older method for dealing with template errors, and I want to show it to you because you can make it a part of your error handling framework. Now within the CF error tag, what I did was ended up choosing template and type. So first of all, it needs to know what template to show, and also the type of error that that template's going to handle. So within the template section, what I'm going to say is error exception.cfm is going to be my template. And within the type section, there are a few different types that I can set up, and I'm just going to set up exception. Within this CF error tag, I'm going to do template once again, and this template is going to be error request.cfm. And my type here is going to be request. Now within this area, and I'll move this back up where it should be and make a little space here so you can see what I've done. Now within this particular area, you can see I have a type of exception and I have a type of request. I'll save this application.cfc and let me go out and create an error. So on my error.cfm, I have this form error that's going to be created. I'm requesting form variables, and I haven't even submitted a form. So that should cause an error within ColdFusion. Let's take a look at what happens. Notice I have the exception error handler. And within the exception error handler, I actually have a dump of the error variables. So here is the first name is undefined in the form. Now within the root cause, I do have a few more details about what happened, but I'm going to close that up just by clicking it. So here's the information about my error. But this is why I wanted to be very particular about which page was actually being handled. You can see the exception error handler is what handled this one. And if I collapse this up, there's nothing else showing on this page. So that is my exception error handler is handling the fact that these form variables don't exist. Notice I did not get the site-wide error handler. So let me try another type of error. So let me comment out this type of error, and I will uncomment the database error. So this one will trigger a database type of error. So I'll put it in the full browser just because it ends up a little bit bigger. Notice the database error is being handled by the exception error handler as well. Data source travel could not be found. So the data source does not exist that I'm trying to use. And that's because that's not even the database we are using. Notice there's also a date time available to you here. So if I wanted to access this information within a log file, I would use the error dot scope, and I would say error dot date time. So I can actually print those out within this page instead of doing a dump, because this certainly is not what I would want a user to see. The idea is these are variables available for you to put into whatever you want on this page. So you could set up an email, you could set this up to create a log file, or whatever it is you wanted to do with these particular errors, just so you could begin to learn what errors are being triggered within your application, and you can take care of them. Now that's the exception error handler, and you can see it does a dump just fine. What happens if I go out to the request directly? I'm trying to do a dump of error variables. They haven't been triggered, so that will trigger an error on this page. Notice when my error request page, which is what I'm requesting, triggers an error, it ends up in the exception error handler also. Error is undefined. In other words, there are no variables within the error scope. So that variable can't be displayed, which actually triggers an error on the error request, which calls the error exception page. We're not getting the site-wide error handler. So how can I trigger the site-wide error handler? What that will usually be triggered by is syntax errors. So let me uncomment this first one. And what if this is a tag that doesn't make sense? So I just misspelt this. You can see this is telling me that there's a problem. I'll save it, and let me go out to this page and see what happens. And it's trying to connect. It couldn't. Notice the syntax error triggered the site-wide error handler, not the error request or error exception. And you will find most of your errors are handled by the exception type or the site-wide error handler. So you'll find even if you have this one defined, it won't be used too often as a request type error. Most errors do tend to fall into the exception area. I'll go back and correct this code so it's not a problem. But syntax errors usually end up at the site-wide error handler. The concern with that error handler is it's the same error handler across all the applications within your ColdFusion server. So you do have to keep that in mind. But that is setting up the CF error tag, specifying the type of error, and the page to show when that error occurs within our application framework.